Well, what this is called an Aoian Grand, and it is a product of the Aoian Corporation, which started off making these little organettes. And that one behind you, that's a 46 note. That was their first large player organ. And then this was the second generation. This plays 58 note. The guy who sent it to me thought it just needed a little bit of work, but when these things started getting valuable, people did a lot of cobbling just to get them by, to get them to play, so they could turn a profit. And so that made the restoration a lot more difficult in some ways than if it had never been touched. Like, see, that one's never been touched. That's been in the same family. And, so there was a lot of gaskets, rotten gaskets glued together, tar, stuff put in to prevent something leaking and stuff like that. So I had to do a lot, oversized screws and that kind of stuff, and stuff chewed up. And so I had to do a lot of reworking of that.
Do you try to use as much original materials if you can?
Yeah, and there's 58 little pneumatics that trigger the devices that open the pallets to play the reeds. And those were recovered with this prophylactic material, same kind of latex that's used on prophylactic. Which in the trade is called Perflex. But it's still the same thing. It's still condom rubber.
So this is a condom organ?
Not anymore.
What did you put in its place?
Well, you put zephyr skin, which is hog intestine. But it's it's airtight and very strong. It's like tissue paper. It's very light, but it's very strong and very airtight. And then I had, the bellows. I had to make a whole new bellows unit because it was cobbled up really bad. These were in wealthy homes, and one little sideline was that the generation after the Grand was the Orchestrelle, and it's bigger. It was a more higher. Well, the Grand was more for the middle class, upper middle class, and the Orchestrelle was more for rich people. It was bigger. It used the Vocalion organ, which is very high, very high class reeds. For tone, you use pressure rather than vacuum, which is a little more complicated, but most reed organs operate on vacuum, which means like some of the sound is sucked in. It doesn't, but when you're having pressure, it actually is projecting the sound a lot more. Right. Yeah, the interesting thing about it though is that this organ is independent of the player. The player mechanism, there's a separate organ that the player mechanism operates. It doesn't operate
through the keyboard.
This is like just a conventional cottage reed organ like that one there. And then it has another separate organ on top of it. Now there is a manual, pneumatic to manual. You can actually play both organs. This has 2 sets of reeds in here in a chamber on top of bellows. And then there's another chamber up here, and there's like 5 sets. Judging by the rolls, that seems to be more of a secular instrument, I would say, or the family. This is more for the music appreciation, because like a lot of the roll, I don't run into pop music on this very often, but most of the stuff is just like that's just overgrown organette.
Yes.
So there is lots of dance.
So in other words, that thing might play something of the times of the day that were popular, whereas this might be not necessarily contemporary. It might be something
more like, well, here, here's some of the rolls here. It's like Beethoven Seventh, Fledermaus Overture, Pomp and Circumstance.
Oh, I see.
A lot
Very-
of symphonic, a
very
lot of
classical
symphonic pieces.
Classical and very formal sounding.
Yeah, and when you think about it, you know, this music, you would have to go to a concert to hear it. You can't go down and buy a CD. You can't go down and buy a CD of Fengel and Cave Overture back then. So this was like, here, you know, here you have all the classics, you know, all the classics in your home. And what's interesting is the rolls are taken directly from the orchestra score. They're not hand played. They're basically done on a drafting table from the orchestra score.
Wow, how interesting. Now,
so there is, when you hear this, you're going to hear more of a sense of an orchestra playing rather than someone playing it on an organ.
I see, like you might hear in a theater or in a church.
Mm-hmm.
It has a more orchestral feel. Now, I know that you can make your own rolls now of music. Did you make anything for this one?
Not yet. We're working on it.
But it is possible that you can custom make one for this?
Eventually, we'll be able to make. We're going to make rolls for that.
Yeah.
Actually, it's harder. There's a couple guys that are cutting rolls for this already, but no one's cutting the 46-note rolls yet.
Okay.
And these two pedals, these are expression, make it loud and soft. One is called, that doesn't affect or change the tones, because the problem with these reed organs is that all the reeds sound alike. But you got this, what's this called, a swell, which basically opens shutter. All the reeds are encased in this shutter unit. You can see it being activated there.
Okay. Very good.
And this is called a sforzando. Well, the way that works is it's a pipe organ term, and it is a separate pedal that's used for expression, but what it does is as you press it down, it gradually turns on. First it starts with the quietest voice pipes or reeds or whatever, and then adds more banks. It actually turns on more ranks of pipes or reeds. What this does is, as you move it out, it starts out with the softest reeds and opens up more reeds as you push on it until you get to the louder banks. If you have all these stops off, it'll start with the softest ones first, the softer voice reeds, and then gradually add more reeds as you apply pressure to the pedal. And then when you put it back, it goes back to your original settings.
Huh.
So I think we're ready to go.
All right.
Go.